He was a starving, beaten German shepherd, watching the woman he loved being abused by her cruel husband. He had no strength left, but he did the only thing he could. He threw his own body in the way to shield her. The kick he took in return broke his ribs. But that single, brutal act of cruelty was seen by a Navy SEAL in the shadows, and it ignited a fire that would bring an entire corrupt empire crashing to the ground. The autumn air off Lake Erie was sharp enough to sting the lungs, heavy with the scent of decaying leaves, damp earth, and the faint, clean smell of cold, deep water. It was a chill that seeped through a jacket, settling over the affluent suburb of Beacon Bay like a somber promise of the coming winter. Gas-style lamps flickered along the slate sidewalks, casting long, wavering shadows that played between the skeletal branches of ancient maple trees. This was the historic district, a place where Gilded Age money had built imposing Tudor and brick mansions that now stood as monuments to old power. It was exactly the kind of quiet Cade Sterling had been looking for. Cade, a man in his early 30s with the quiet intensity of a predator at rest, was a Navy SEAL, currently on administrative leave. There was nothing outwardly threatening about him in his worn jeans and a simple gray hoodie. He was just a shape moving through the midnight quiet, his steps nearly silent on the uneven stones. But his eyes, a deep, observant blue, missed nothing. They scanned the ornate doorways, the sleeping windows, the dark alleys between properties. Peace was his goal, but vigilance was his nature. He was trying to drain the tension from his shoulders, to forget the arid sands and sharp reports of his last deployment, and lose himself in the stoic beauty of the Midwest. He turned onto a street lined with magnificent homes, their manicured lawns hidden behind tall stone walls. The silence here was profound, broken only by the whisper of the wind through the bare trees and the distant hum of the city. Then the peace shattered. It started not as a scream, but as a low, guttural snarl of a voice thick with whiskey. "You useless, stupid." The words were slurred but packed with venom. Cade stopped. He tilted his head, filtering the sound from the ambient night. His body, trained for immediate response, went perfectly still. A moment later, a different sound came. A woman's voice, high and thin with terror. "Please, Marcus, stop. You're drunk. Just come inside." "Are you telling me what to do?" the man roared. "You think you get to tell me?" Cade began to move, not toward the sound, but parallel to it. Using the deep shadows of the sprawling estates as cover, he flowed across the street, his transition from tourist to operator instantaneous. He heard a sharp, wet sound that echoed terribly in the cold air. A slap. It was followed by a choked sob and the sound of something, or someone, stumbling hard against a heavy wooden door. That's when the third sound joined the terrible chorus, the desperate, pained whimpering of an animal. Cade rounded the corner of a high stone wall and saw the scene illuminated by the cold, white light of a porch lamp. The house was beautiful, a two-story masterpiece of dark brick and sweeping gables. But the porch was a stage for a nightmare. A large, barrel-chested man stood over a woman cowering near the front door. This was Marcus Thorne. Even from 20 yards away, Cade could see the expensive, rumpled cashmere sweater stretched tight across a powerful torso running to seed. His face was flushed crimson with rage and alcohol, his heavy fists clenched. The woman on the floor was his opposite. Lena Petrova looked like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. She was impossibly thin, her pale blonde hair stuck to her tear-streaked face. She was huddled into herself, her arms wrapped around her head as if trying to disappear into the floorboards. Between them stood the only defender. It was a German shepherd, but it was a shadow of the breed's noble image. The dog, Kaiser, was skeletal. His black and tan fur was matted, and Cade could see the pale, raised lines of old scars running along his ribs and flank, even in the dim light. He was trembling, favoring his left hind leg, clearly injured and malnourished. But he stood his ground. Kaiser was positioned directly between Marcus and Lena, his head low, teeth bared in a desperate, rattling growl. He was terrified, yet utterly defiant. "Please, Marcus, don't hurt him," Lena whispered, her voice breaking. "He doesn't know any better." "That makes two of you," Marcus sneered. He took a staggering step toward her, shoving a heavy iron bench out of his way. It screeched against the stone porch. Kaiser lunged, not to bite, but to block. He shoved his thin body against Marcus's shins, barking weakly, a sound that was more air than threat. It was a courageous, hopeless gesture of protection. "You worthless mutt!" Marcus roared. He seemed enraged that this broken creature would dare to challenge him. "I'll teach you." Marcus drew back his heavy leather boot. Lena screamed, a raw sound of no. Cade was already moving, but he wasn't fast enough to stop it. Marcus put his full drunken weight into the kick. The boot connected solidly with the dog's ribs. The sound was sickening. A wet, dense thud followed by a high-pitched yelp of pure agony. Kaiser was lifted off his feet, slamming into the brick wall of the house before collapsing onto the porch in a heap. He tried to get up, his legs paddling uselessly, and then lay still, emitting a low, agonizing keen. Lena crawled toward the dog, sobbing. Kaiser. Oh, goodness. Marcus laughed, a short, barking sound. He turned back to Lena, grabbing a fistful of her hair and hauling her partially to her feet. Now, you were saying something about going inside? Maybe you need a lesson just like him. Cade stopped breathing. He watched the man raise his open hand again. He saw the woman squeeze her eyes shut, bracing for the impact. He saw the loyal dog try to lift his head, failing. In that microsecond, the Navy SEAL on leave vanished, and the operator took over. Cade didn't analyze the local laws. He didn't consider the consequences of intervening in a domestic dispute in a town where he was a stranger. He only saw a threat, a victim, and a fallen defender. He stepped out of the shadows, moving from the dark sidewalk onto the illuminated stone pathway leading to the porch. He didn't run. He walked, each step deliberate, planting his feet with the solid, immovable weight of destiny. The porch light caught the sharp angles of his face, revealing the absolute zero in his eyes. Marcus, his hand still raised, sensed the new presence. He paused, blinking stupidly, trying to focus his drunken gaze on the silhouette that had appeared in his yard. Lena opened her eyes, her tear-filled gaze locking onto the stranger. Cade stopped at the base of the porch steps. He didn't shout. He didn't yell. He commanded. He used the voice he reserved for breached doors and compromised missions. A voice that wasn't loud but was so deep and resonant with pure, controlled power that it vibrated in the cold air. It cut through Marcus's drunken fog, Lena's sobs, and the dog's whimpering like a razor. Stop. Right now. The two words hung in the frigid Ohio air, sharp and cold, slicing through the drunken rage and the whimpers of pain. Marcus Thorne, his hand still raised to strike, froze. He blinked, his large head swiveling slowly toward the figure at the bottom of his steps, his alcohol-fogged brain struggling to process this new variable. What? What did you say? He slurred, squinting. Cade Sterling stood perfectly still, his weight balanced, his hands relaxed at his sides. He was a portrait of calm, a direct contrast to the violent chaos on the porch. I said, stop. Marcus let go of Lena's hair, shoving her away. She stumbled and fell back near the front door, next to the whimpering German shepherd. Marcus, emboldened on his own property, puffed out his barreled chest and staggered to the edge of the porch, looming over Cade. You're on my property, boy. You think you can come here and give me orders? He laughed, a wet, ugly sound. You see her? He hooked a thumb back at Lena. She's mine. That mutt? He spat. That's mine, too. Everything here is mine, and I do what I want with my property. Cade's eyes were flat, unreadable. His SEAL training screamed at him to neutralize the threat. To end this in 3 seconds. He saw every opening, the man's poor balance, the way he led with his chin, the sloppy, undisciplined rage. But his discipline held. Escalating physically would only get him arrested, and it would leave her behind, alone with this monster. There was another way. Slowly, without breaking eye contact, Cade slipped his smartphone from his back pocket. What's that? Marcus sneered. Going to call your mommy? Cade raised the phone, his thumb tapping the screen to life. The red icon for video record began to blink. I am recording, Cade stated, his voice as calm and clear as a winter morning. It is 11:04 p.m. I am at. He glanced at the elegant brass numbers on the house. 22 Lakeshore Drive. I am witnessing a man identified as Marcus commit domestic assault against a woman named Lena and commit aggravated animal cruelty. He panned the camera slowly, capturing Marcus's furious face, Lena huddled by the door, and the bleeding, broken form of Kaiser. I am now calling 911. He was about to tap the screen when Lena scrambled forward on her hands and knees. No. Her voice was a terrified shriek, but it wasn't directed at Marcus. It was aimed at Cade. No, please don't. Please don't call them. You'll make it worse. Please. Cade paused, his finger hovering over the call button. He looked at her, truly looked at her. The terror in her eyes was absolute, and it was for him, for the police, for the very idea of rescue. It wasn't the reaction of a victim about to be saved. It was the reaction of a prisoner who knew the guards were on the warden's side. Marcus watched this, and a slow, cruel smile spread across his flushed face. He let out a low chuckle. You hear that, hero? She knows. She knows the score. He took a step down, leaning into Cade's space, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, whiskey-soaked whisper. Go ahead, call them. I dare you. I own this whole precinct. I pay their salaries. I put the chief's kid through college. You know who they're going to arrest? You. For trespassing, for harassing my wife. He tapped his own chest. I'm Marcus Thorne. I built this town. And you? You're nothing. Before Cade could formulate a new plan, a sweep of red and blue light painted the bare trees. A Beacon Bay PD cruiser, moving without speed or urgency, glided to a stop at the curb. It hadn't been his call. They must have been on a routine patrol, or perhaps a neighbor had called before and given up. 2 officers climbed out. The first was Sergeant Miller, a man in his late 50s with a face like a worn-out boot, creased with cynicism, and a prominent gut that strained his uniform. The second, Officer Brody, was younger, barely out of his 20s, with a nervous energy, his eyes darting from the mansion to his senior partner. Sergeant Miller sauntered up the walkway, his hand resting on his belt, not his weapon. He saw Marcus on the porch, and his entire posture changed from cop on duty to old friend. Marcus. You throwing a party and didn't send an invite? His voice was jovial, familiar. What's all the racket? Marcus, instantly transformed, became the magnanimous victim. He gestured at Cade. Jim, thank goodness, this trash just walked onto my property, started filming my wife, threatening us. We're terrified. Sergeant Miller's friendly expression vanished as he turned to Cade. His eyes went hard and cold. Is that right? You in the habit of peeping on folks, son? And what's that in your hand? He nodded at the phone, which Cade still held, though he had lowered it slightly. Officer, I'm a visitor here, Cade said, his own voice tightening with a disciplined anger. I witnessed this man, he gestured to Marcus, strike this woman and viciously kick that dog. I was recording the crime. Miller didn't even glance at Lena or the dog. He stepped directly into Cade's personal space, a classic intimidation tactic. A crime, you say? I don't see a crime. I see a man on his own property having a private discussion with his wife, and I see you trespassing. That's what I see. He looked at Cade's phone. You pointing that thing at people, making them feel unsafe, that's harassment. It's a family matter, and you ain't family. He was assaulting her, Cade repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. That's he said, she said. Miller was close enough now that Cade could smell the stale coffee on his breath. So, here's what's going to happen. You are going to delete that video right now while I watch. Then you're going to turn around and you're going to walk away from this street and not come back. Or I am going to arrest you for public disturbance, trespassing, and harassment. Do we understand each other? Cade looked past Miller's hostile face. Officer Brody, the younger cop, was looking at Lena, who was rocking back and forth, whispering, I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Brody knew. The young cop knew exactly what was happening, and he looked away, ashamed but utterly silent. Cade looked at Marcus, who was smiling, arms crossed, leaning against a column like he was watching a play he'd produced. The tactical situation was impossible. He could not win. He could fight. He could drop both officers and Marcus before they could even unholster their weapons. But he would become the fugitive, the villain. He would be hunted, and Lena would be left here to face a rage he couldn't even imagine. He had been rendered completely, totally impotent. The feeling was worse than any wound he had ever taken. With a slow, deliberate motion that cost him every ounce of his self-control, Cade Sterling looked Sergeant Miller in the eye. He brought his phone up, tapped the gallery, selected the video, and pressed the delete icon. A confirmation box popped up. He pressed it. It's gone, he said. The words tasted like ash. Good choice, Miller grunted. Now get out of here, and don't let me see your face in this neighborhood again. Cade turned, his back rigid. He did not look at Lena, he could not. He walked down the stone path, each step a defeat. As he reached the sidewalk, he heard Marcus's voice, friendly and booming once more. Appreciate you handling that, Jim. Tell the chief I'll see him at the fundraiser on Friday. Drinks are on me. Cade Sterling disappeared back into the cold, sharp darkness, the gas lamps illuminating nothing but his own cold, helpless fury. The fight hadn't ended. It had just begun. Sleep did not come. Cade lay on his back in the sterile, beige motel room, staring at the ceiling fan as it wobbled in its slow, ineffective circles. The heater clanked and hummed, but it couldn't cut the deep chill of the room, nor could it cool the hot, acidic anger churning in his gut. He was a man trained to solve problems with brutal efficiency. He was the tip of the spear, the instrument of focused, Overwhelming force. Yet last night, he had been disarmed, dismissed, and defeated. Not by a foreign operative or a hardened insurgent, but by a drunken bully and a pair of complicit, uniformed patrolmen. The feeling of impotence was a venom, and it had poisoned his night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lena's face, a mask of pure terror, not just of her abuser, but of the very concept of help. He heard the sickening thud of the boot connecting with the dog's ribs, a sound that seemed to have permanently embedded itself in his memory. He heard Marcus's mocking laughter and Sergeant Miller's casual, corrupt dismissal. He couldn't leave. His leave was supposed to be about decompression, about washing the desert sand from his mind. But leaving now felt like desertion. At 6:00 a.m., as the first gray light of dawn began to seep into the room, Cade was up. He showered, the cold water doing nothing to wake him but serving to focus his mind. He dressed in simple cargo shorts, running shoes, and a dark, nondescript t-shirt. He looked like any other tourist out for an early morning jog. He grabbed a pair of small binoculars, perfectly normal for a visitor admiring the lakeside architecture, and was out the door. He drove his rental sedan, a deliberately boring and common model, back to Lakeshore Drive. The sun was rising, casting a brilliant golden pink light that made the calm surface of Lake Erie glow. The town was beautiful, cheerful, and utterly oblivious. The contrast made Cade's teeth ache. He parked 3 blocks away in a spot that gave him a clear line of sight to the side in front of Marcus's mansion but was far enough away to be unremarkable. He sat sipping lukewarm coffee from a thermos, and he watched. For 2 hours, nothing. Then, just after 8:30 a.m., the massive front door opened. Marcus Thorne emerged. He was a new man. He wore a crisp, expensive-looking gray suit. His hair was slicked back, and he was carrying a leather briefcase. He looked powerful, respectable, a pillar of the community. He got into a gleaming black Cadillac Escalade parked in the driveway and drove off, presumably to one of the construction sites or board meetings he used to terrorize the city. The casual public transformation from monster to magnate made Cade sick. Cade waited another 20 minutes, his focus absolute. He scanned the windows of the house. Nothing. It was locked up tight. Then, in a second-floor window, a curtain was pulled back for just a second. He saw Lena's face. It was pale, drawn, and utterly empty. She stared out at the beautiful morning, but she wasn't seeing it. She looked like a ghost in her own home. The curtain fell back into place. His gut tightened. He adjusted his binoculars, scanning the property. His eyes landed on the side yard, a patch of grass hidden from the street by a high wrought iron fence. There was Kaiser. The dog was chained to a thick metal stake driven into the ground. The chain was short, barely 6 feet long. He was in the full, biting wind coming off the lake, which was already picking up, promising a day of bone-chilling cold. The dog lay on his side, shivering violently, his ribs rising and falling in shallow, rapid breaths. His fur was matted with the blood from last night. Not 10 feet from him, just outside the radius of the chain, sat a large, overturned water bowl. It wasn't just neglect. It was a deliberate, casual act of torture. Cade's hand tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. He was done waiting. He didn't have a plan, but he was going to act. He was going to call animal control, the fire department, the media. He didn't care. He was going to get that dog some water. He got out of the car, his movement stiff with anger, and started walking toward the house. He kept to the opposite sidewalk, his mind racing, trying to build a tactical solution for a problem that had no clear entry point. He was so focused on the house, on the dog, that he almost missed the voice. "You." It was quiet, almost a whisper, but sharp. Cade stopped, his body instantly going on alert. He scanned. Across the street, on the porch of the house directly adjacent to Marcus's, a woman was watching him. She was elderly, small, and wiry, with deeply tanned, wrinkled skin and a cascade of silver-white hair pulled back in a severe bun. She was partially obscured by a jungle of hanging ferns and potted geraniums. This was Eleanor Vance. Her dark, intelligent eyes missed nothing. She had seen him last night. She had seen him this morning. And she had clearly made a decision. She didn't point. She just made a small, subtle gesture with her head. "Come here." Not there. Here. Cade, trusting the gut instinct that had kept him alive on 3 continents, changed his trajectory. He crossed the street, not toward Marcus's house, but toward hers. He walked up her short pathway, his senses on high alert. "He's gone," Eleanor said, her voice still low, with the flat, clear accent of the Midwest. "He won't be back until 6, but his cameras are everywhere. Do not stand on the sidewalk." She opened her screen door. In my house. Now. Cade stepped inside. The house was small, immaculate, and warm. It smelled of strong coffee, old books, and lemon polish. It was a sanctuary. Eleanor locked the deadbolt behind him and led him to a small kitchen in the back of the house. She poured him a cup of black coffee without asking and sat down at a small formica table. She stared at him, her gaze so intense it was almost physical. "You are the man from last night," she stated. It wasn't a question. "The soldier." "How did you know?" Cade asked, his voice low. "I saw the way you stood," she said simply. "I saw the way you did not back down, even when that pig Miller tried to break you. I have lived next to that thing for 10 years. I have seen men twice your size crumble when he yells." She leaned forward. "I saw everything last night. I saw him kick that poor animal. I saw him hit her. And I saw you." "They wouldn't do anything," Cade said, the frustration from last night returning. "The police are his." "Of course they are," Eleanor scoffed as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Thorne Construction builds their police athletic league. He pays for their fundraisers. He is this town. You were right to walk away. If you had fought, you would be in a cell right now, and they would have lost your paperwork. And poor Lena. He would have taken it out on her." "So, what's the answer?" Cade asked, gripping the warm mug. "He has everyone." "Not everyone," Eleanor said. Her dark eyes glittered. "He does not have me." She stood up and went to a nearby bookshelf which was overflowing with well-worn paperbacks. She moved aside a large, leather-bound copy of Moby Dick, revealing a small, hidden alcove in the wall. From it, she pulled a small fireproof safe. She spun the combination, opened it, and took out a single, tiny object. She walked back to the table and placed it in front of him. It was a black USB flash drive. Cade just looked at it. "Marcus is not smart," Eleanor said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He is just loud. He is arrogant. He thinks everyone is either bought or terrified." She tapped the USB drive. "I am neither. I am just an old woman who watches. My bedroom window faces their kitchen. My garden shed has a perfect view of their back patio. And he is a creature of habit." Cade looked up, his heart beginning to beat with a new, tactical rhythm. "I have been recording him for 18 months, Eleanor said, her voice cold with a righteous fury. "I have video of him breaking her arm last Christmas. I have audio of him telling her that if she ever leaves, he will hunt her down and drop her through the ice on the lake. He is not just a brute, soldier. He is a devil." She pushed the flash drive across the table until it touched his hand. "I have called the police before. I sent them a video. They lost the evidence. I gave up," she said. "But then last night, I saw you. You are not from here. You are not bought. And you are not afraid. Not in the same way. The police will not help. But perhaps," her eyes bored into his, "a soldier can." Cade sat at Eleanor's small kitchen table, the USB drive warm in his hand. The tiny object felt impossibly heavy, loaded with the weight of 18 months of hidden suffering. The house was silent, save for the ticking of a grandfather clock in the next room and the distant, muffled sound of a leaf blower starting up down the street. "My laptop is in the car," Cade said. His voice was flat, all emotion carefully compartmentalized. "I need to see what's on this. All of it." "Be my guest," Eleanor said. She got up and pulled 2 blinds closed, plunging the kitchen into a cooler, dimmer light, safe from any prying eyes. Cade retrieved his laptop, a rugged, nondescript black machine built for durability, not style. He set it on her table, booting it up. In these few simple motions, the shift was complete. The angry tourist was gone, replaced by the SEAL operator setting up a forward observation post. He inserted the drive. A single folder appeared, meticulously organized. Eleanor, he realized, was more than just a concerned neighbor. She was a natural intelligence gatherer. The folder was divided into subfolders labeled audio and video, and then by date. "He is a creature of habit," Eleanor said, her voice quiet as she watched him. "He gets like this, the violence, on Fridays after his big meetings or on holidays. He seems to hate holidays." "Let's start with Christmas," Cade said, his jaw tight. He remembered what she'd said. He navigated to the folder and found the file. The video was shaky, filmed through a window at night, partially obscured by a reflection of Eleanor's own curtains. But it was clear enough. The sound was muffled, just a low, angry rumble from Marcus and Lena's high, pleading tones. They were standing near a brightly lit Christmas tree. Marcus was wearing a gaudy sweater. It looked grotesquely festive. Cade watched as the argument escalated. Marcus shoved her. Lena stumbled back, knocking over a small table. She tried to get up, and that's when it happened. It wasn't a punch. It was cold, deliberate. Marcus grabbed her by the wrist and twisted. Cade saw her entire body go rigid, her mouth open in a silent scream that he couldn't hear through the glass. Marcus twisted again, a sharp, brutal motion, and then pushed her away. She collapsed, cradling her arm, her body convulsing in sobs. Marcus stood over her for a long moment, took a drink from a glass, and then walked out of the room. Cade, a man who had seen the absolute worst of human combat, felt a cold sickness rise in his throat. This wasn't the heat of battle. This was the methodical, calculated breaking of a thing he considered his property. He closed his eyes for a single second, then opened them. "Show me the dog," he said. Eleanor's face hardened. She found another file. This one was from the garden shed, clearer, with audio. It was a cold day, late winter. Kaiser was just a puppy, maybe 6 months old, chained to the same stake. Marcus was in the yard with a high-pressure garden hose. He was spraying the dog, laughing as the puppy yelped and tried to escape the freezing water, choking as the chain pulled tight. "Toughen up, you mutt." Marcus's voice boomed on the recording. "You're going to learn discipline." The muscle in Cade's jaw jumped. He hit stop. He couldn't watch any more of that. "Now you must listen," Eleanor insisted. "This is the most important part. This is why she stays." She clicked on an audio file. The quality was better. She must have had a recorder hidden closer. There was no shouting, just Marcus's voice. Low, calm, almost conversational. It was the most terrifying thing Cade had ever heard. "You think you can leave?" Marcus's voice purred. "You walk out that door, Lena, and I will find you. You go to a shelter, I will burn it down. You go to the police, you saw what happens. They call me." There was a pause. "You think anyone would even find you? I build this city. I'd put you in the foundations of the new marina. I'd weigh you down with cinder blocks from my own site and drop you through the ice on Lake Erie. I would erase you, Lena. You, your mutt, anyone who helped you. You belong to me. Dead or alive, you belong to me." The audio ended. Cade sat back, the blood draining from his face. He let out a slow, controlled breath. This changed everything. This wasn't a domestic dispute. It was a hostage situation, and the perpetrator owned the entire city. "He's Thorn Construction," Eleanor said, filling in the silence. "He's the biggest contractor in the state. He built the new wing on the hospital. He rebuilt the entire waterfront. He's bidding on the new police station headquarters. He puts men on the city council like a man planting flowers in a garden. He uses his money, his power, and his rage to control everything." "Sergeant Miller? Thorn Construction paved his driveway for free last summer. The chief of police? Marcus is the godfather to his youngest son. He is Beacon Bay, just like he told you. He is a cancer, and he is spread everywhere." Cade was silent for a long time. His military mind was processing the new intelligence, re-evaluating the mission parameters. He saw the situation with a chilling new clarity. Eleanor watched him, her old eyes sharp. "So, what do we do? We send this to the FBI, to the newspapers." Cade slowly closed the laptop. "No." Eleanor looked stunned. "What do you mean, no? We have the proof." "We have proof of the abuse," Cade said, his voice hard. "But Eleanor, we don't have proof against his power. We leak this, what happens? Marcus unleashes his lawyers. He'll say the videos are deepfakes. He'll say you're a crazy old woman. He'll say Lena is unstable. The police will investigate and find nothing. The DA, who probably plays golf with him, will decline to prosecute. And then, Marcus will know. He will know we are coming for him, and he will act on his promise." He looked at her. "He will kill her." The color drained from Eleanor's face. "Then what? We do nothing?" "No," Cade said. He leaned forward, the tactical plan forming, cold and sharp. "We change the battlefield." He tapped the closed laptop. "This isn't the weapon. This is our motive. This is the why, but it's not the how. We can't attack him for being a monster. They already know that, and they don't care. We have to attack him for being a criminal." "But he is a criminal," Eleanor protested. "Not in a way they care about. Not yet." Cade's eyes took on a distant, focused look. "A man this arrogant, this sloppy, this convinced of his own power. He cuts corners. He's cheating on more than his wife. I guarantee he's cheating on his contracts, his taxes. Bribes, fraud. He's using substandard materials on city buildings. He's paying people off." He stood up, pacing the small kitchen, his energy filling the room. The local cops won't care about a beaten woman. But the FBI, the IRS, they care very much about wire fraud and racketeering. Marcus's power doesn't come from his fists. It comes from his wallet. We have to destroy his wallet. We have to dismantle his entire network, brick by brick, until he has no one left to call, no one to protect him. Then we use these videos. He stopped and looked at Eleanor, his expression grim. But to do that, we need more than grainy videos from a shed. We need an insider. We need a witness who can point us to the other crimes. Eleanor understood. Lena. Cade nodded. She's been living inside his fortress for years. She's seen the books. She's heard the phone calls. She's seen who comes and goes. These videos, he tapped the laptop again, won't set her free. They'll only get her killed if we use them wrong. He turned and looked out the curtained window toward the silent, imposing mansion next door, where a woman and a dog were prisoners. We need her to talk. The waiting was the hardest part. Cade sat in Eleanor's kitchen for another hour, the USB drive and his laptop stowed in his backpack. He was a man of action, and every second he spent idle felt like a second wasted, a second that Lena and Kaiser were in danger. He checked his watch. 10:00 a.m. Marcus had been gone for 90 minutes. It was time. I need to get to the dog, Cade told Eleanor. He needs water now, and I need to talk to her. Eleanor's face was etched with worry. The cameras, soldier. He has them everywhere. The front porch, the driveway. He won't have them in the side yard, Cade said, his mind already mapping the route. It's a blind spot. It's too close to your property line. He relies on that iron fence. He had prepared. He pulled a stainless steel water bottle from his pack along with 2 high-protein granola bars. Stay here. Be my eyes. If you see his car or any police car, flicker your porch light. Be careful, she whispered. Cade nodded. He exited her house, not through the front, but through her back door into her small, immaculately kept garden. He moved along her privacy fence until he reached the rear of her property, which bordered a narrow, forgotten cobblestone alley that ran behind the mansions. He was in the alley for less than 30 seconds, just another shadow moving between the high brick walls. He reached the back of Marcus's property. The wrought iron fence was 8 feet tall, topped with ornamental spikes. For Cade, it was a minor inconvenience. He found his holds, tested them for strength, and in one fluid, silent motion, he was up and over, landing on the grass of the side yard with no more sound than a cat. He was in. He froze, crouching, and scanned his surroundings. No alarms, no motion detectors. Just as he'd thought. Marcus's security was built on arrogance, on the assumption that no one would dare. He saw Kaiser. The dog, hearing the faint sound, had lifted his head. His body was tense, and a low, rattling growl started deep in his chest. He tried to get to his feet to be a protector, but his back legs trembled and he staggered, his ribs heaving from the effort and the pain of last night's kick. Easy, Cade said, his voice a low, soothing rumble. He did not approach directly. He showed his empty hands and moved in a slow, respectful arc. Easy, boy. I'm not him. I'm not here to hurt you. The dog's growl continued, but it was laced with fear. He was trapped, injured, and a strange man was in his yard. I know, Cade murmured. I know it hurts. He unclipped his water bottle, keeping his movements slow and predictable. He located the overturned water bowl. He didn't try to retrieve it. Instead, he walked to it, poured half his bottle of water into it, and then, using his foot, he slowly, gently slid the heavy ceramic bowl across the grass. He pushed it just far enough so it was within the dog's 6-foot chain. Kaiser stopped growling. He stared at the water, his parched tongue darting out to lick his nose. He was desperate but still suspicious. It's okay. Drink. Cade backed up, giving him space. The dog's thirst finally won. He limped forward, his head low, and began to drink, lapping at the water with a frantic, gulping noise. While the dog was distracted, Cade unwrapped one of the protein bars. He broke it into small, thumbnail-sized pieces and tossed them one by one onto the grass near the bowl. Kaiser finished drinking, looked at the food, and then looked at Cade. The suspicion was still there, but the immediate threat was gone. He cautiously sniffed the first piece, then ate it, then the next. Cade had just disarmed the first sentry. What are you doing? The voice was a terrified whisper. Cade's head snapped up. Lena was at the kitchen window just above the side yard. Her hand was pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide with a terror so profound it made her look like a ghost. She was even thinner than she'd appeared last night, a pale, fragile creature swallowed by the dark opulence of her own kitchen. Lena, Cade said, keeping his voice calm and low. My name is Cade Sterling. I was the man here last night. You need to go, she stammered, her words tumbling out. He'll kill you. If he finds you here, he'll kill both of us. He'll kill Kaiser. Please, go. She was backing away from the window as if just speaking to him was a crime. I'm not leaving, Cade said, his voice firm but kind, projecting absolute reassurance. Marcus is not here. I watched him leave. It doesn't matter. He has cameras. He'll know. Not here, Cade said, tapping the ground. This is a blind spot. I'm here because I know what he is. I'm here because of Eleanor. Her name stopped Lena cold. She froze, her hand still at her mouth. Eleanor? I've been with her all morning. I've seen her videos. Lena, I saw what he did at Christmas. I've heard the audio, the threats. I know exactly what he is. Lena's face crumpled. The mention of the proof, of the hidden history she thought she had suffered alone, broke through her terror. She leaned her forehead against the window glass, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. You don't understand, she whispered, her voice thick with despair. It won't work. The police, they're his. Sergeant Miller. He comes for dinner. It's useless. You're going to get us all killed. No, Cade said, stepping closer to the window. You're right. The local police won't help. The videos of the beatings are not enough. They will protect him. Lena just cried harder, her last hope extinguished. That's why I'm not going to the police. She looked up, confused. I am a Navy SEAL, Cade said, his voice imbued with a confidence she had not heard in years. My entire life is spent dismantling men who think they are kings. Men like Marcus. But I can't attack him for being a monster. I have to attack him for being a criminal. I need proof of his business, Lena. His contracts, his fraud. That is how we take away his power. That is how we put him in a cage the local police can't open. He looked at her, his gaze unwavering. I promise you, on my life, I will not let him hurt you again. But you have to help me. Lena stared at him. She looked down at Kaiser, who was now lying by his water bowl, his tail giving a single tentative thump on the grass as he looked at Cade. He, in his simple animal way, had already decided to trust. Lena's face changed. The despair was replaced by something else. A spark, a flicker of the defiance that had been beaten down but never fully extinguished. She was a hostage who had just been handed the schematics of her own prison. Stay here, she mouthed. She vanished from the window. Cade's body went tense. This was the critical moment. Was she calling Marcus? Had her fear won? Was this a trap? He scanned the yard, planning his exfiltration route. 1 minute passed. 2. The kitchen window slid open with a screech of unoiled metal. Lena was back. Her face was pale, but her eyes were electric. He made me his bookkeeper, she whispered, her voice frantic and fast. He said it was cheaper, and that way no one could rat him out. He thought I was too stupid to understand any of it. Her thin, trembling hand emerged from the window. She was clutching a small, black, leather-bound ledger. I can't leave. He tracks my phone. My car has a GPS. But I copied everything. His private accounts, the real numbers. She threw the book. It arced through the air and landed with a soft thud on the grass at Cade's feet. That's his real business, she said, the words pouring out of her. The insurance fraud. He damages his own equipment on site and bills the insurance, then sells the scrapped equipment for cash. The substandard materials, he's using C-grade concrete on the new city marina but billing them for military grade. The payoffs to the inspectors. It's all in there. His real numbers, his offshore accounts, it's all there. She gripped the windowsill, her knuckles white. Eleanor's videos will make people hate him. But this will make the federals arrest him. This is what will finally take him down. Please, take it. Take it and destroy him. Cade bent down and picked up the ledger. It was small, but it was the most powerful weapon he had ever held. He looked up at this woman who had just signed her husband's death warrant, and maybe her own. He didn't smile. He gave her a single, solid nod. An oath. I have it. Be strong. This is the beginning. Do not let him know, no matter what. He slipped the book into the waistband of his shorts, concealed by his t-shirt. He gave Kaiser one last look, then moved to the fence, and as silently as he had arrived, he was gone. Cade slipped back over the iron fence into the alley, landing with a practiced, feline silence. The small black ledger was tucked securely against his skin, A small square weight that felt heavier than any piece of body armor. He was inside Eleanor's house 2 minutes later, locking the back door behind him. She was waiting in the kitchen, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. She didn't ask, her eyes screamed the question. Cade pulled the ledger from under his shirt and placed it on the kitchen table next to the USB drive. "This is it," he said, his voice a low, controlled hum. "This is the how." She had it. She's been copying his numbers. Fraud, payoffs, substandard materials. It's all here. Eleanor sank into a chair, her hand going to her heart. Thank the saints. She is so brave. She's a survivor, Cade corrected, his focus absolute. He looked at the 2 items on the table, the USB, the proof of his brutality, and the ledger, the proof of his corruption. We have the full arsenal. Now, we have to decide how to use it. The FBI, Eleanor said immediately. We take this to the FBI in Cleveland. They are not his. Cade shook his head. Not yet. That's a mistake. Eleanor looked at him, confused and crestfallen. What? Why? It is everything. It's a mistake in timing, Cade explained, his operator's mind clicking through scenarios. We go to the FBI. They open a file. They start an investigation. It takes weeks, maybe months. They have to subpoena records, get warrants. The second they do, Marcus knows. The second his bank or his office gets a federal request, he knows there's a leak. And what does he do? He destroys evidence. He transfers his money. And, Cade's voice went cold, he silences the leak. Permanently. We can't risk that. We can't give him time to react. So what do we do? Eleanor whispered, the hope draining from her face. We don't give them time to open a file, Cade said. We create a firestorm. We have to detonate this publicly, all at once, with so much noise that the feds are forced to act immediately. We need to light a fire so big that the entire city, the state, the national news are all watching before Marcus even wakes up. We need to paralyze his network and protect Lena with a wall of public outrage. We can't trust the police. The newspapers are probably in his pocket. We need someone who can't be bought. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. A small, strange smile touched her lips. I know a man. He is a pest. The city council despises him. The police chief has tried to sue him. They call him a lunatic, a conspiracy theorist. Perfect, Cade said. His name is Leo Finch, she continued. He runs a podcast, a very small, very annoying podcast called The Eerie Exposé. He talks about zoning violations and restaurant health codes. He thinks he is a great investigative journalist. Most people think he's a joke. Does he hate Marcus Thorne? Cade asked. More than any man alive, Eleanor said. Thorne's company bought the apartment building Leo's family lived in and evicted them all to build luxury condos. Leo has been trying to find anything on Marcus for 3 years. Get me his contact information, Cade said. We're going to give him the story of his life. The meeting was set for 2 hours later at a small, loud coffee shop in Cleveland's Ohio City district, far from the polished lakefront suburbs. Cade arrived first, chose a back booth, and waited. Leo Finch bustled in 10 minutes late, a whirlwind of nervous energy. He was young, maybe 27, with a shock of unruly red hair, thick glasses he kept shoving up his nose, and a messenger bag overflowing with notebooks. He was fueled by a visible mix of caffeine and deep-seated indignation. He didn't look like a journalist. He looked like a grad student who had just lost an argument. You're the guy, Leo said, sliding into the booth without shaking hands. He pulled out a recorder. You said on the phone you had proof of Thorne Construction cutting corners. Look, if this is about him using non-standard drywall again, I've already done that story. They don't. Cade didn't say a word. He slid his laptop across the table, headphones plugged in. Start here. It's not about drywall. Leo sighed, annoyed by the dramatics. He put on the headphones and pressed the play button Cade indicated. Cade watched him. For the first 30 seconds, Leo was impatient, tapping his pen. Then his tapping slowed. He leaned closer to the screen. His eyes, magnified by his glasses, went wide. His mouth fell slightly open. Cade saw the color drain from his freckled face as Marcus's cold, murderous voice filled his ears. Put you in the foundations of the new marina. Weigh you down with cinder blocks. When the audio file ended, Leo sat frozen. He slowly, shakily took the headphones off. He was pale. My goodness, he whispered. That's Marcus. That's really him. He looked at Cade, his skepticism gone, replaced by a raw, vibrating awe. He's a monster. That, Cade said, is the why. It's Eleanor Vance's recording. It's why he has to go down. He pulled the small black ledger from his bag and placed it on the table. And this is the how. This is from an inside source. This is what you've been looking for. Leo's hands were trembling as he opened the book. He was, as Eleanor said, a numbers guy. He understood this language. His eyes flew across the pages, his breath catching. The marina contract, he whispered, tracing a line with his finger. He's billing for military-grade rebar. But the shipping invoice? This is C-grade steel from China. He's pocketing 60 cents on every dollar. He flipped another page. The insurance claims. 3 excavators vandalized on the same site. These are the same serial numbers he sold at auction 2 months later. This isn't just cutting corners. This is racketeering. This is massive, systemic fraud. This ledger. This is the Holy Grail. Leo looked up at Cade, his eyes burning with a zealot's fire. I have a source, a city structural engineer they fired last year for insubordination. He'll be able to verify this. Put a dollar amount on the fraud and, more importantly, on the danger. The marina wall. How long? 36 hours, Cade said. Leo's voice was hard. Give me 24. I'm going to verify this. I'm going to link it to the police chief's new house, and I'm going to burn his entire kingdom to the ground. For the next day, Beacon Bay went on as usual. The sun rose, the commuters drove into Cleveland, and the wind off the lake grew colder. Cade stayed in his hotel, a ghost, while Eleanor waited in her kitchen. The silence was a pressure cooker. Then, at 5:00 a.m. on the second day, Cade's phone buzzed with a text from Leo's burner number. It contained a single link. The new episode of the Erie Exposé had just dropped. It wasn't the usual 30-minute rant. It was a 2-hour investigative special. The title was simple: The Thorn Empire, the Monster, the Fraud, and the City That Paid for It. Cade put in his earbuds and hit play. It opened not with Leo's voice, but with the sound of a woman's muffled sobs taken from one of Eleanor's videos. Then Leo's voice cut in, cold, sober, and full of controlled rage. You are listening to the sound of Beacon Bay. The sound we have all been ignoring. He detonated the bomb. He played Marcus's murderous threat in the first 2 minutes. He introduced Eleanor, an anonymized longtime resident who had documented the terror. He introduced the engineer, his source, who walked listeners through the ledger, explaining how the new marina sea wall was a structural nightmare built with cheap concrete and counterfeit steel. He connected the ledger to public records, showing payoffs to 2 city council members and the gift of a new roof for the chief of police. He wove the why and the how together. He painted a picture of a man who was not just a domestic abuser but a public threat, a racketeer who was stealing from the city and endangering its citizens, all while being protected by the very people paid to stop him. The podcast spread like wildfire. By 7:00 a.m., it was trending in Cleveland. By 8:00 a.m., the local news stations, who had ignored Leo for years, were scrambling, their phones ringing off the hook. By 9:00 a.m., the national papers had picked it up. By 10:00 a.m., Leo's final words were echoing across the state. I have forwarded this entire, unedited package, the ledger, the audio, the videos, and the structural analysis, to the FBI's Cleveland field office. The bomb is active. The only question left is, will the city of Beacon Bay finally run for cover, or will they try to shield the man who is holding the detonator? The bomb detonated at 5:00 a.m. Marcus Thorne, sleeping off a late-night whiskey in his palatial bedroom, was woken not by an alarm but by the frantic, high-pitched buzzing of his phone on the nightstand. It wasn't one call, it was a deluge: his lawyer, his office manager, the 2 city council members, and most alarmingly, the chief of police. He ignored them, groaning, and swiped at the screen to check his alerts. His world ended. The Erie Exposé was the #1 trending topic in Ohio. His name was attached to words like fraud, monster, and racketeering. He clicked the link, his hand, still puffy from sleep and alcohol, starting to tremble. He didn't listen to the whole thing. He heard the audio, he heard his own voice, cold and murderous, promising to drop her through the ice. He heard a man he'd never met, an engineer, calmly explaining how the marina sea wall would likely fail in a heavy storm. He heard his secret, sacred numbers being read aloud for the world. A primal, guttural roar of pure rage ripped from his throat. He threw the phone. It shattered against a priceless antique mirror, which cracked in a spiderweb pattern. Lena. It had to be Lena. She was the only one who knew the numbers. She had betrayed him. He stormed out of his bedroom, bellowing her name. He kicked open the door to the guest room where she'd been sleeping. It was empty. The bed was neatly made. He ran downstairs through the silent, opulent house. She was gone. Sometime in the night, after he had passed out, she had vanished. He roared again, sweeping a priceless vase off a pedestal. It exploded on the marble floor. And then his rage focused. Lena was too stupid, too weak to do this alone. This had a professional feel. The timing, the execution. It was that man, the stranger from the porch, the one with the dead eyes who hadn't been afraid. He had done this. He had gotten to Lena. Marcus's network was on fire. The feds were involved. The police chief, in a panicked, one-sentence text, had told him he was on his own. The city council members were unreachable. His power, the intricate web of favors and threats he'd spent a decade building, had evaporated in 2 hours. He was a cornered animal, and cornered animals are the most dangerous. He couldn't call the police. He couldn't use his usual channels. But he wasn't without resources. He had a payroll, and on it were men who didn't work in his office. He made a call to his main construction site foreman. "Find me Jackson Rizzo," Marcus hissed into his backup burner phone. "The ones who handled the union problem last year. I need them to visit a motel. There's a pest I need exterminated. Now." Cade Sterling was not celebrating. He was in his cheap, anonymous motel room on the outskirts of Cleveland, far from the wealthy suburbs. His bag was already packed. He had slept for exactly 1 hour, sitting in the room's single, uncomfortable chair, facing the door. He knew this was the most dangerous phase of the operation, the moment the enemy knows he's been hit, but before he's been captured. This was the moment of lashing out. He was just zipping his bag when he heard it. Not a knock, but a sound outside his door. The heavy, clumsy tread of 2 large men trying and failing to be quiet. He heard a low, muttered argument. "Room 214. This is it. You got the key?" Boss said, "Just knock. Be nice, then not nice." Cade moved away from the door, his body flowing into the shadowed corner near the bathroom. He picked up the heavy, metal-based lamp from the desk, his hand weighing it. He discarded it. Too loud, too messy. He preferred his hands. A heavy, pounding fist struck the door. "Housekeeping," the voice was a joke. The man sounded like he gargled with gravel. Cade stayed silent. "He ain't answering," the first voice said. "Boss said he's in here. Just open it." There was a scraping sound as a tool, likely a pry bar, was inserted into the frame of the flimsy door. They weren't professionals. They were just brutes. The door jamb splintered. The lock gave way. The door swung open with a crash. The first man in, Jax, was a mountain of a man, over 6 feet 5 inches, with a shaved head and a thick neck that seemed to grow directly from his shoulders. He was built for demolition. His partner, Rizzo, was shorter but wider, with long, greasy hair and a mean, pinched face. He was holding a short, heavy pipe. They barged in, expecting to find a sleeping man in a bed. "Where is," Jax started to say. He never finished. Cade, moving from the shadow, was on him. He used Jax's own momentum, his hand striking not his face but his collarbone, driving a cluster of nerves. Jax's entire left side went numb, his arm dropping uselessly. As the giant grunted in confused pain, Cade spun behind him, one arm looping around his thick neck, the other hand pressing against the back of his head. It wasn't a punch. It was a rear naked choke applied with the speed of a striking snake. Jax, all 300 pounds of him, was cut off from air. He clawed at Cade's arm, but his oxygen-starved brain gave up. In 4 seconds, he was unconscious, sinking to the floor like a deflated building. Rizzo, stunned by the speed of it, finally reacted. He raised the pipe, swinging it in a wide, panicked arc. Cade, having released Jax, met the attack. He didn't block the pipe. He moved inside it, his forearm striking Rizzo's wrist, breaking his grip. The pipe clattered to the floor. Before Rizzo could even yelp, Cade's other hand shot out, a palm heel strike to his nose. It wasn't a fist. It was a concussive, non-lethal blow. Rizzo staggered back, eyes watering, his balance gone. Cade swept his leg, hooked his ankle, and Rizzo fell backward, his head hitting the cheap carpet with a dull thump. He was dazed, but not out. Cade was on him in an instant, a knee on his chest, a hand on his throat. "Who sent you?" Cade's voice was a whisper, but it was more terrifying than any shout. Rizzo, gasping, his eyes wide with terror at this silent demon, couldn't speak. Cade didn't have time to ask again. "State Patrol. Hands in the air. Hands in the air, now." The doorway was suddenly filled with men in the crisp gray and blue uniforms of the Ohio State Highway Patrol. They were holding sidearms pointed at Cade. This was the variable. Cade instantly released Rizzo, raising his hand slowly to shoulder height. "I'm unarmed," he said. A senior officer, a female captain, stepped in. She was a tall, lean woman in her 50s with sharp features and eyes that had seen everything. Her name tag read Rustiva. She looked at the scene, the broken door, the unconscious giant on the floor, the groaning man with the bleeding nose, and Cade, perfectly calm, hands in the air. "You're Mr. Sterling?" Captain Rustiva asked. Her voice was deep, professional, and held zero trace of local corruption. "I am," Cade said. "Well, Mr. Sterling," Rustiva said, gesturing for her men to secure the two thugs, "you have had a very busy morning." She looked at Rizzo. "That's Rizzo Calvini. And that," she nodded at Jax, "is Jax Teller. Two of Marcus Thorne's favorite unpermitted demolition experts." Two troopers hauled Rizzo to his feet, cuffing him. Another two were struggling to cuff the unconscious Jax. "We got a tip from the FBI's Cleveland office," Captain Rustiva explained, holstering her weapon as she saw the threat was over. "They received a rather explosive podcast this morning. They've been building a quiet file on Thorne for months, but that little gift-wrapped package from your reporter friend gave them everything they needed." Rustiva stepped aside as her men dragged the two thugs out. "The feds are moving. The governor called my office an hour ago, screaming. He wants this entire city's corruption cleaned up by sundown. He does not like his state's marinas being built with cheap cement." Cade finally lowered his hands, the adrenaline beginning to recede. "What about Thorne?" Captain Rustiva permitted herself a small, cold smile. "That's the best part. As we were knocking on your door, a separate team, led by me personally, was serving a federal warrant at Thorne Construction Headquarters. We're seizing every server, every file, and every ledger." She checked her watch. "And right about now, Mr. Marcus Thorne is being placed in handcuffs for wire fraud, mail fraud, racketeering, and thanks to Ms. Vance's excellent recordings, aggravated assault and terroristic threats. He won't be having dinner with Sergeant Miller tonight." Cade looked at the broken door, the proof of Marcus's last, desperate act of violence. The trap had sprung. The monster was in the cage. The safe house was nothing like the mansion on Lake Shore Drive. It was a small, two-bedroom apartment in an anonymous complex 20 miles outside the city, secured by the State Patrol and funded by a victims advocacy program. It was beige, generic, and had mismatched furniture. And to Lena, it was the most beautiful place on earth. For the first time in 4 years, the air didn't smell of stale whiskey and fear. It smelled of cheap, freshly brewed coffee. Sunlight, bright and unfiltered by heavy drapes, streamed through the sliding glass door, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Lena sat on a simple sofa, legal documents spread on the coffee table. She was still thin, and the yellowish-purple stains of old bruises still marred her skin, but they were fading. Her eyes, however, were entirely different. The haunted look was gone, replaced by a quiet exhaustion, and beneath that, the first glimmers of resolve. On a donated rug at her feet, Kaiser was fast asleep, lying on his back with his paws in the air. He was a different dog. 3 square meals a day, a quiet environment, and proper veterinary care had done wonders in just a few short days. His coat was clean, his ribs were less prominent, and he was snoring. A low, contented rumble that was the new soundtrack of Lena's life. He was, for the first time, truly at peace. A soft knock came at the door. Kaiser was instantly on his feet, but he didn't bark. He looked at the door, and his tail gave a single inquisitive thump. Lena's heart gave a familiar jolt of fear, a reflex she was still trying to unlearn. But she knew who it was. She went to the door and opened it. Cade Sterling stood in the hallway. He was dressed in the same simple jeans and a t-shirt, a heavy black duffel bag at his feet. He looked like what he was, a soldier in transit, his time in her world at an end. "Hi," she said, her voice soft. "Hi, Lena." He nodded, his eyes kind. Before she could invite him in, Kaiser nudged past her legs, his tail wagging fully now, and pressed his head firmly against Cade's hand. Cade smiled, a rare, small upturn of his lips, and dropped his hand to the dog's head, scratching behind his ears. "He looks 1,000% better," Cade said, his voice appreciative. "He is," Lena said, stepping back. "We both are. Please, come in." Cade stepped inside, but only just. He left his bag by the door. "I can't stay long. My leave is over. I have a flight out of Hopkins in 3 hours. "Oh." The news settled on her, a mixture of gratitude and a sudden, sharp sting of loss. He was the anchor she had clung to, and now he was leaving. Of course. Your duty. I just came to make sure you were settled, he said. And to give you the final update. I spoke with Captain Rustova this morning. Marcus has been indicted by a federal grand jury. They hit him with racketeering, wire fraud, mail fraud, and money laundering. He is not getting bail. Period. The state charges, the assault, the terroristic threats, are just the icing on the cake. What about the others? She asked. The FBI and the Ohio Bureau of Investigation have taken over the corruption probe. Sergeant Miller and his partner have been suspended without pay pending a federal investigation. The 2 councilmen are next. Leo's podcast gave them an ironclad roadmap. The entire Thorn network is gone. It's over, Lena. Truly. She absorbed the news, letting the finality of it wash over her. It was real. She was free.
I don't know what to say, Cade.
Thank you. Feel so small. You saved my life. You saved your own life, he said, his gaze steady. You and Kaiser. You got that ledger. You were brave long before I showed up. I just helped with the logistics. She shook her head, not accepting his deflection. She reached into the pocket of her jeans and pulled something out. I don't have anything. The lawyers have frozen all of his accounts, and I don't want any of it. But I wanted to give you this. She pressed a small, smooth object into his hand. It was a piece of beach glass, worn into a soft, frosted teardrop shape by the waters of Lake Erie. Its color was a deep, impossible blue. It was my grandmother's, Lena said, her voice dropping to a whisper. She found it on the shore when she first came to this country. She said it was a piece of the lake's heart, and it would keep you safe and always help you find your way back home. She looked up at him, her eyes clear. To protect you. Her fingers, still thin, brushed his calloused, scarred palm as she gave it to him. The brief contact was warm, and for a split second, it felt like an electric charge, a jolt of pure human connection that made both of them pause. Cade looked at the beach glass, then closed his fist around it. He felt the worn, smooth edges, cool in his hand. I can't accept this, he said quietly. It's yours. I want you to have it, she insisted. And then, the most remarkable thing happened. Lena, the ghost he had seen cowering on the porch, the terrified woman at the window, stood up straight. The tremors were gone from her hands, and she smiled. It was the first real smile he had ever seen from her. Small, hesitant, but real. It lit her face. You showed me that good people still exist, Cade. You walked into the dark and, for no reason at all, you held up a light. Let me give you this. Please. Cade looked at her, truly seeing the woman she was becoming. The strength that had kept her alive, that had pushed her to copy those numbers, was finally on the surface. He nodded, slipping the piece of glass into his jeans pocket, where it settled against his leg. Thank you. He stepped back toward the door and picked up his duffel. This was the end. The mission was complete. He was supposed to turn and walk away. But he stopped, his hand on the doorknob. He was a man of discipline, of clear lines, but the lines here had blurred. He turned back. Lena. She waited, her breath catching. He hesitated, the words foreign, unprofessional. I'll be back to Ohio, he said, his voice quiet but certain. When my duty allows. I'll come back. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, a promise. Her smile softened, the gratitude turning into something deeper, something shared. She didn't say, I'll be waiting. She didn't need to. She just nodded, holding his gaze. Cade held her look for one more long second, committing this new, strong version of her to memory. Then he turned, opened the door, and walked out. He moved down the anonymous beige hallway, his boots making a soft, rhythmic sound on the carpet. He didn't look back. When he reached the elevator, he put his hand in his pocket. He felt the weight of the smooth piece of glass, its edges worn and safe against his fingers. It was an anchor. And for the first time in his life, Cade Sterling left a mission behind knowing he had a very good reason to return.